Live from Genghis Cohen in the heart of Hollywood, it's the Nighttime Show with your host, Stephen Kramer Glickman. Tonight, we have a very special guest, author and creator of Starship Troopers and Robocop, Ed Neumeier. We also have our house comic, house writer, house idiot, Matt Walker. I'm the voice of the Nighttime Show and sexy as hell, Mike Black. And now the host, part man, part machine, all calories. It's Stephen Kramer Glickman.
You betcha. How we doing? Everything good? We good?
Woo.
Yes. Hello.
Very
How
exciting.
are we? We are good. Mike Black, well done.
If you
Great.
were tired before that intro, you've got to be wide awake after hearing that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such an enormous honor to have you here, sir. We are huge fans, Ed. We're big fans. I told you right before we started that me and Mike Black here just recently went and watched Robocop in the theater together again, which was super fun. And then a couple months ago, we went with you and Paul Verhoeven and Casper and the great Casper Van Dien, our dear friend, to go watch Starship Troopers at the ArcLight, which was such a total pleasure and super
That
cool.
was like nerd fantasy camp for me.
God, it really was.
Well, it's really nice to be here in Hollywood at Genghis Cohen and hang out with you guys. I'm sorry I didn't get to the New Beverly. That sounded like a lot of fun.
Oh, it was a good screening, too, when the audience was like, they were just into it. And there were maybe 3 people that hadn't seen it before. And it was just as fun watching them watch it as it was watching the movie, because they were like, how is this happening? Like they're like, I don't understand how this is allowed to happen.
Yeah, Paul Verhoeven and I used to say about these movies that these movies, no one was looking when we made these movies because otherwise they would have stopped us.
They had that look like they were afraid the theater was going to get raided.
Yeah.
They were just like, are we allowed to watch this? These are like 30-year-old men that were just like, I don't know if we should be watching this.
Did it feel like
great.
that when you guys were making it? That you guys were going to get stopped at any second and be?
Not really. I think I have to say that working with Paul Verhoeven and with the producer John Davison and with my partner on RoboCop, Michael Miner, and then Michael didn't do Starship, but we all kind of had a sense, we're doing this. But we don't have to tell everybody we're doing this. We're just going to do this because this is what we like to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was kind of a quiet, that wasn't the, I think that it was, I think in the 80s, it was a time to be more provocative, and people, it was kind of cool to be provocative, coming out of Watergate and all that kind of thing. So I think that we were trying to do that, and it was accepted readily. It seems more provocative now than what people are allowed to do for some reason. I'm not quite sure why that is.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, too, is that back then, because everything was being built and you were building these giant, real,
practical
effects, it felt so visceral. Like, you watch it and you feel like it's all really happening. And I think sometimes in movies these days, CG stuff because everything looks so clean and everything is most of it's not done practically, you don't feel the same kind of impact. Maybe your mind feels that it's not as real.
Well, people talk about this a lot. Chris Nolan has staked part of his reputation on it, and that is the idea that reality. Verhoeven said to me many years ago, he said, the best special effect is reality. Mm-hmm. And by that, it means if you can do something real, it's going to look better than if you do it if you fake it. And if you have to fake it, if you have to use CGI or effects, then you have to try to emulate reality. Yeah. Things have to move in a realistic way, and I think he's really right about that. Yeah. And I think that what we're seeing now more and more is people mixing that up and wanting you to not know it's an effect.
Yeah. I think sometimes the best special effects, at least in the last couple of years, have been when they have a practical effect and they mix it with CG, like having a giant, real, massive costume, but then animating the eyeballs, or animating the something in the head to make something something move differently.
Well, human beings are they're really acute about how things look and how they move. They know that. We study it. It's part of our, hunter-gatherer brain that's trying to survive. And so we know when something's not right. Yeah. And I think that accounts for why there's the uncanny valley where we look at things that aren't quite right. And if they get close to looking like us, we really are afraid of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a species idea,
Yeah. And there are some things that we're like, the effects are getting so good that we only know it's fake because we know it's fake. Like I remember reading on a message board about the Avengers, someone said, the Hulk looks fake in this movie, and someone underneath wrote, well, the Hulk is fake. That's the only way you know that at this point.
But you know it, but it has to, when it's good, it behaves like it's real. We were talking before we started about the new Planet of the Apes movie, which is sort of just an astounding piece of effects work.
It really is.
Also very well directed. And it works because you are willing to believe that these apes are sitting around talking to each other about headaches and battle plans and stuff. And you really believe it.
And in those movies, in Planet of the Apes, what they're doing differently than they would have done in the past is they're taking guys, they're putting them in motion capture suits, and they're shooting them, instead of on a stage, they're taking them to the forest and shooting them in the forest. Which is how it all shares the same light. Everything feels right.
It all feels right.
Yeah, because they're doing it there as opposed to.
That's a big thing too. Just light alone, makes a big difference on adding a digital effect like that.
Absolutely, and being able to capture people's performances and things like that. But let's start. I want to go back in time.
Okay.
Let's go back to the beginning, Ed.
Okay.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a lovely little town called San Anselmo, California, in Marin County, across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco.
Wow.
It's like a little Rockwell town. And
cool.
It was really, of course, when you're growing up, you think everything's horrible or something. But when I look back on it, it was really quite a lovely place. It was a good time in that it was the post-60s, post-Watergate, and there was a sense that you could do or think anything you wanted. In fact, you were kind of encouraged to. It only lasted for a few years, but it was something that I had the full benefit of. It was also an area where a lot of interesting things were going on. That we are still talking about today. Silicon Valley was coming up, and there was a sense that there were computers around. There was this movie business up there led by first Francis Ford Coppola and then George Lucas, and and George Lucas lived in my hometown. And I didn't know it, but he lived like 2 blocks from my house when I was growing up in a little suburban street. So the way I first heard about him was someone was making a movie called American Graffiti, and some older high school kids were in it because they were extras in the dance scene that was filmed at Tam High School nearby. And then about one summer, early one summer, I think, right after I turned 16, there was a envelope appeared in our mailbox. And I don't know that it was golden, but it should have been, because it was 5 tickets to a special screening of American Graffiti that happened at the North Point Theater.
Wow!
And why they appeared in my mailbox, I don't know. I think it's because they had extra, and someone walked down the street and put them in the mailbox. So we went there and saw this, and Lucas was there, Coppola was there. This was a famous screening that is talked about in Peter Biskin's book, Easy Rider, Raging Bulls. And they showed the movie for the first time to an audience and to publicists. And the studio, then run by a fellow named Ned Tannen, came in and said, "We don't like this movie, we're going to cut it." And it was sort of amazing. Now, this happened to me when I was 16 years old. So the impact it has on me is like, hey, people make movies, That's cool.
And they make them
like movies.
around
and
you.
they make them in front of you. And they just make them.
When I was 16, I played in the marching band at my high school, and they were filming a movie at this school that was right next door. And they made us shut up the marching band when we were practicing in the morning because we were interrupting the filming of Zapped 2.
Zapped
with Scott Baio.
All right.
Way.
Very similar
pay
experience.
$50 to shut up.
Very similar experience, obviously.
Well, no, it is. I think when you're younger, it shows you that there's a bigger world out there. And there is a real benefit to being in the right place or wanting to go to the right place.
Right.
So anyway, the next thing that happens a few years later, I'm in college at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm working on the newspaper because that's kind of what I thought I should do, is work on a newspaper, be a journalist. And in comes a thing announcing, a thing from 20th Century Fox announcing this movie called Star Wars, and I had never seen anything like it. It was just like, oh my God, I gotta see this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And it was what later became called George Lucas's used future. No one had ever done that before. And so then it turns out it's the same guy who lives in my town who made it. And Star Wars was shot in England, but it was posted and made in San Anselmo, California.
Yeah.
And so when I was 19 years old, we saw the movie and were blown away from it. We realized it was made by this guy. So my friends and I went around and found all his offices. And we literally walked into his office at lunchtime one day when everybody was gone and found, like there were the phones and it said George and it said, all these kind of, it was a very exciting thing for
a different time for security
who
too.
wanted to, yes, it was a different time for security for sure.
What are these scripts for episodes 1, 2, and 3 doing?
That's right. It was all laid out. No, anyway, so we were very excited by it. You could go in the phone book and look up phone numbers for Luke Skywalker and Leia Skywalker, and they had all these weird coded things out there. So this was the effect this had on me was overwhelming. Like, okay, I wanna make movies. And I went from UC Santa Cruz, which is in Northern California, and was then a bastion of gradeless hippies.
The banana slugs.
The banana slugs, actually.
Great mascot.
Tarantino wears a banana slug T-shirt in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I left, and I went to UCLA Film School and decided I had to become a screenwriter because I didn't have enough money to be a director. I had that money to make a movie. So,
what did your parents do? What type of work did they do?
my father was a journalist, and then a school sort of administrator, high school administrator. So I grew up knowing all the teachers knew me and I knew them, which wasn't always a good thing.
Yeah.
And my mother was also a high school guidance counselor in the same district. They had both been big travelers. My father had been a journalist before. And although my mother says I'm not supposed to talk about this, they actually did some intelligence work when they were a young married couple in Thailand.
Wow.
That's
So
exciting.
they're kind of like, my parents were sort of like James Bond in the suburbs.
What? That's so
Awesome.
cool.
But they're great people. She's still alive, and I'm still not sure she might be working for him.
I love it.
Now that's a movie script. Right?
I've thought about that. I went to China with her a year ago to Shanghai.
And she still has old enemies there.
She went and met with these people that she'd worked for, where she taught people English. And I looked and I realized, I said, Mom, this was like where all the Chinese spies came from. This is where they would run them through this program before they came here. And she said, oh, Eddie, don't talk about that.
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's
Awesome.
Did you go to school for journalism first?
I always wanted to be a writer. I was rightfully afraid to be a writer because it's such a miserable existence sometimes. But you have to come up with stuff all the time. And so I kind of thought I should be a writer, but I went. I liked working on newspapers. It was fun to. I actually worked on the art department side. I did the graphics and stuff, and occasionally I would write. And I had kind of grown up in a writing family. So then, and a writing family that my father sort of disdained movies. So the idea that I would go become a screenwriter, there's just all sorts of weird edible shit in there.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
So I went off and defied my father and became a screenwriter and wrote pop bullshit about robots.
Yeah.
And
Fuck yeah.
Now,
yes, you did. Absolutely.
When you get to UCLA, it's UCLA Film School.
Yep.
Were there a lot of people that we've heard of that you were in school with?
there were actually now, not then, of course,
Yeah.
but
Right, yeah.
I was in school with the star of that class then was a guy named Alex Cox, who was older and he was British, so he was smarter than all of us. And he made a movie called Repo Man at UCLA. Now, his roommate at that time was a guy named Michael Miner, who I would later write Robocop with. And I think Michael actually wrote the original treatment for Repo Man. So Michael was he was also older than everybody else, and he'd come back to graduate school, and he was the star cinematographer. And I didn't know him at UCLA because I was just a lowly grunt guy. But I also knew the person who showed me around the film school the first day is a woman named Nancy Richardson, who's cut all the Twilight movies and big editor.
Yeah.
Her later, the director she worked for was another person. Catherine Hardwick was there. And I didn't know a lot of these people at the time, but just out of film school, a couple years, 5 years, I got a job as an executive at Universal. It was then called MCA, and I was at Universal as an executive in a suit for about a year, and I called everybody in that I'd ever met or heard of at UCLA, and that's how Michael Miner came into my life, showed up one day, and we got along, and he's got a lot of energy, and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I really want to write this movie I have been thinking about forever called Robocop. And I had been thinking about Robocop for about 4 years at that point. And he said something like, "Oh, well, I'm doing a rock video that has a robot in it, so we should work together." And it kind of worked like that, And
Wow.
but it was
It's a hell of a resume for that.
Well, it was probably there was a lot of luck involved in Robocop because I kept meeting the right people. And that's, I think, I knew at the time that if you could get 3 or 4 people together who were in the right positions and felt the same way about something, you might have something, and it really worked that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. That noise is, I don't know if you can hear it on the podcast. But.
What is that?
We're just hearing a very weird tone, just so you guys know what's going on. But
It's out there somewhere.
It's done.
Yeah, it
It's
wasn't
over.
It wasn't our system. It was out there somewhere.
That was like pipe groan, wasn't
Yeah.
it? From Genghis Cohen.
The nuclear strike warning or something. Nothing important.
Jump under the
to
table.
worry
We're
about.
safe. We're at Genghis Cohen, the greatest Chinese restaurant in history, so we're fine.
It's nuke-proof here.
We're fine here. We can just live under the pot stickers.
If you could pinpoint what the kernel was for RoboCop, like, do you remember what inspired it or?
I actually remember the day I got the title, and it was kind of I worked on the Warner Brothers lot. It was then called TBS, and it was co-owned by Warner Brothers and Columbia Pictures. I was working for Columbia. My office was in a trailer. Some of the best offices I ever had were in trailers, oddly there, and it was right next to this set where. They were making this enormous science fiction movie. I'd never seen as big a set go up before, and I was just crazy to work on any kind of movie. I didn't want to be a story analyst anymore and read bad scripts, and I should be writing a script. And I had some ideas about what I wanted to do. Let me give you a little context here.
Sure,
I wanted to
please.
write something about business because this was in the early '80s, and business was something
Huge.
that was coming up, and there was this kind
The
of
yuppie
notion
mentality.
It was the yuppies. It was the idea. What I really liked, there was a kind of a swagger, like we're businessmen, we're killers, and I kind of wanted to make fun of that, and so I was working on another project that I think about adventures in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm. And was this before Wall Street had come out?
No, actually, this was before. Yes, it was
Okay.
before because Wall Street comes out a year after RoboCop or thereabouts. But anyway, so I'd been thinking about all this, and at that time. Further context: Star Wars had been big, but then there had been a bunch of movies that tried to be Star Wars that weren't very big. Right. And the kind of the rule of thumb was those are expensive movies, and no one knows how to do them, so don't do science fiction. And so I had been trying not to think about science fiction, but I really like science fiction, and I always have.
Yeah.
And so I walk over to this set, and it's Blade Runner, and they're shooting Blade Runner. It's in 1981. Wow. Mm-hmm. And there's Ridley Scott and there's Harrison Ford, and it's just this. It's such a busy set. There's so much art direction that they don't even know who's working on the set, who's not. So I started just going after work. I would go work all night long on the Blade Runner set for about 3 or 4 nights while it shot there as part of the art department. And they had me doing really amazing things like making trash, which was you take a hose and newspaper and just make sopping newsprint and spread it around. And there's a very glamorous job.
You have shots you can point to. That's my trash.
But I remember there was this moment. So I was working and I was tired and I was in this immersive environment. And one night late, I said, "What's this movie about?" Because I didn't really know. And they said, "Oh, it's about robots." And they pointed at Sean Young, the actor Sean Young, who was wearing a tutu in this scene, walking on the street. And they said, "She's a robot." And I was like, "Huh, that's a robot? That's not." It's kind of like that's not what I think a robot looks like. And then then I was sitting some night at 4 a.m. looking at that blue car that they called the Spinner.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it was there on the set. It had been a crane had put it down, and I had this big flash of there's this robot cop, the kind of cop that I think a robot, what I think a robot should look like, and he's standing next to that car on this street, and he's having a sense of why are these people so fucked up? And the name of the movie is Robocop, and it was like I couldn't even believe that, And then I thought about it for a while, and then decided, it would be more interesting if the guy used to be a man, and he turned into was turned into a machine. And that was really the kernel that it went forward. And so it was an idea about science fiction, about law enforcement, and about this kind of new business world we were coming into in the 80s, which we're still living in now.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the image that you came up with of him standing in front of the car is almost exactly the poster for RoboCop.
I can't tell you, and I knew it was going to be really blue dominant, as a blue would be dominant in it, and I knew that it would be directed by a foreign director as I went on with it. I just had this idea, it should be done by a foreign director for some reason. And I don't know if that's because I grew up traveling and had some romance about, foreign films, or I'm not sure what it was, because I wasn't really a foreign film guy, but I just had a sense that it should be, in a way, the way it worked out is you have somebody, and you have, by the way, it's not just any foreign director, it's one of the genius directors of our time, looking at this script, this world, and that's a whole other story, but it was pretty amazing how well that worked. And,
I mean, it examines America through the eyes of this person that's no longer a person who's seeing it with fresh eyes, and I think maybe having a foreign director looking at America that same way might help.
I think so too, and I think he really the interesting thing about Paul is once he commits to an idea, he just really commits. That's what you're doing. And for Paul, it was a little, he wasn't sure about he read the script and he really liked the kind of the brutality of it in a way, and how violent it was. He'd never seen anything like that. And I think he immediately got kind of, without it ever being stated, there was always kind of a Christ Frankenstein metaphor, which he related to very well. And he didn't understand at first why it was funny. And that was a thing that everybody used to say to me, like, why is this funny? And even Michael Miner, during the first draft, was like, "Why is this funny, Ed?" I mean, it's and I had always had a theory that you could get a bigger laugh if you told a joke right after something really violent happened.
100%.
And it really works now. You see it. Bond had done it a little bit, really, if you think about it, kind of a grim humor. But so
you guys really do it best. I mean, in RoboCop and in Starship Troopers, both of them, like, you have an incredibly violent thing. Like, one of my favorite moments, one of the best moments I think ever, is when the guy gets blown to pieces, and he's
by Ed 209,
and he collapses on the mock-up of the
Delta
city, right, of Delta City. And then someone goes, "Someone get an ambulance!" Someone yells, and it's
a little too late.
Yeah, those moments, or the moments where you're cut to the funny the fake TV show, or the fake commercials, or the brand new car advertisement with the all that stuff. They're so funny. And
what it cut to though was the elevator scene with the executives. And one of them, it's too bad what happened to him, and the other one, hey, that's life in the big city.
Yes,
and I was like, God, that's beautiful.
Well, that was kind of the attitude of the looking out for yourself, ruthlessness as a way of life, and of course, I mean, that reflected that time, but of course you're waiting then for how will this work out for Miguel Ferrer's character, Bob Morton,
right.
And in any event, the counterpoint humor was good, and Verhoeven really got it and really went for it. He talked I saw an interview with him recently where he said that at first he was like, I'm not sure about this, but then later he kind of looked at it, and I gave him some he left and he said, write a script that doesn't have any, it's not funny. Do it straight. And so we really struggled, and I think we couldn't really. I didn't think I finished it, and Michael gave up halfway through, we can't, whatever. So when he read what we had, he said, I was wrong. We should go back to your script, and that's just never happens,
Wow.
Not with an American director at that time.
No.
And so we went back to the second draft script that we had written, and he really invested in it, and he really went for it, and he encouraged he encouraged those kind of things, and it was, for me, it was very like, oh boy, I can really do this now. Let's just go and be as funny as we can, and we tried to be.
So great.
It paid off.
Yeah.
Big time.
It really did.
As you pointed out earlier, today is the 30th anniversary.
It is. I can't believe it.
And
real.
Having just seen it again, it plays so well. We saw a really good print of it too. We saw a very nice restored print, but the effects still hold up really, really well. How close is the RoboCop on film to what you had originally envisioned, as far as like the look of him and everything?
Well, I had something in my mind that was very close to that, but this is better, and I give most of that credit to the producer and the director, because they really took, the experience. A lot of screenwriters is, well, I'll go see what they used in my stuff,
Yeah.
And this was all of my stuff, and part of the reason for that. And the good ideas of many other people they brought to it, and that we as writers sort of get credit for. But it was really because you had all these smart. The real secret of this, of course, folks, is to work with people who are smarter than you are. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
And if you can develop that skill, then you can imagine things, and then they'll get done pretty well. So the experience was, it just got better and better and better. And when I saw it, and no one ever thought it was, oh, it's good enough. And when I saw it, it was like, wow, that's like more than I could have hoped for. And everything is working pretty well. And no one ever said, you have to change this or else. They would say, hey, this is too expensive. Or, hey, I don't think this works very well. Or, here's a problem. And then I would change something. I also worked on it all through production. So I was able to...
You were there every day.
Yeah, I was there every day, and I was able to work with Paul and the production and with the actors. So it more than I ever have since, where we could sit down with the actors, and if the actors were into it, you could always tell if they were good into it because they would never change your good lines, but they would sometimes bring good lines with them. Kurtwood Smith was one of the actors who just had a gas, and it was like, what's he going to come up with now?
He was so fun to watch.
He was really great in that movie, and
the
I
big
was
villain of the movie.
Kurtwood Smith plays Clarence Boddicker, and he would come to the set, and he came up with guns, 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 and stuff like that. And it was, hey, you're doing my job. That's great,
when he's brought into the police station, one of the best things that when he spits blood on the file on the desk, and then just give me my fucking phone call. God, what a glorious bad guy line.
See, I think I wrote that line for him, but he decided to spit blood on the docket. So
brilliant.
It's a nice marriage.
It's a nice marriage. Absolutely.
Now, how did you worked on the script with Mike Miner?
I did.
And then how did that go from being a script you guys just were writing in your spare time to being a movie that got made?
Well, it was... Listen, all these movies, I think all movies are difficult things. So the movie was on and off and on and off several times, and it was up. I remember coming to work one day, and John Davis, the producer, said, well, that's it. That's too bad. That would have been a good movie, but we're gone. We're over. And then we weren't. Mike was writing on other projects at the time he wanted to direct. So he actually went off and directed a movie while we wrote and directed a movie. While we were in pre-production on RoboCop, he started writing it, and then I think he shot it right after production ended. He came down to Dallas for about a week or so, I think. He was originally going to be the second unit director on it, but I don't know if that really worked out. That didn't really work out because we had somebody else on it. Yeah. But then he went off and made his own movie, and then suddenly the movie came out, and it was a big hit. And what happens to you, or an unexpected hit, and what happens to you as a writer when you have something like that you're new and whatever is they want you immediately. You become the flavor of the week, as they used to call it. And so we were very much in demand in a world that wanted more action. And we had to, and Michael and I were suddenly a writing team together. We had sort of, written, and then he went off and did his thing, and I went off and made this movie, and it seemed like, all this time had passed. It wasn't that long. And then we were suddenly working for Sylvester Stallone and Joel Silver and Billy Friedkin, which was a nightmare, but I mean, a nice nightmare to have.
What were you working on there?
We were working on a project called The Executioner. It was kind of a novel that you used to find in airports, and it was about a tough guy that went around and killed the mafia. And it was going to be Stallone killing the mafia. Oh. And Joel Silver was an enormous producer in the 80s of action.
Oh, yeah.
Billy Friedkin was a legend who had done The Exorcist and The French Connection. And so this was pretty high cotton. But then we were all sitting here working on this kind of weird movie about a cop who kills mafia guys. So it was all right. It was the I think the word was that Stallone thought the script was too violent. So we were working too far ahead of
the man who made Rambo thought that script was too violent.
I don't know. Anyway, so that was kind of what the transition was like. It was from, hey, we're making this movie. Hey, we want to be writers. Oh my God, here we go. We have to go. Come up with something fast.
Do you like writing by yourself more, or do you like writing with a partner more?
You know, they both have their pluses and minuses. When you work with other people, you have to be able to deal with other people, and you have to compromise, and you have to listen to their stupid ideas or their good ideas that you don't like. And so that's a skill set that you have to. I think I'm more comfortable doing that now. I think I have less sense that, I have all the answers. I think I feel like I need as much help as I can get. So now I'm looking for people. So it's really, Michael Miner and I are actually working together again. And it's actually kind of pleasant after all these years to sort of sit around, because I know what he knows. He knows what I know. We don't have as much ego in it as before.
Yeah.
And we're kind of up to speed with each other. And so that's pleasant. But other times, this thing I just wrote for Sony, a anime called Starship Troopers Traitor of Mars, was written very quickly, and I think it was mostly quick because I had the story, I knew the characters, and that was something I wrote alone in really a relatively short amount of time.
Amazing. That's very cool. You've got your own sandbox now of characters and stuff that you can kind of play with.
Yeah, well, when they, you never know when you're going to come back to something like that. But when I come back to Starship Troopers, it's funny how easy that one is to me to imagine things. I like those characters a lot. Yeah. I sort of understand their relationship to each other. I have a strange relationship with the character Johnny Rico. He's sort of like, I feel like we're similar in that we don't quite know what's going on. We're really trying hard. We're sincere. We're not as smart as everybody else. But and so I really enjoy writing that character for some reason.
Yeah, and you do an amazing job at it. Hey, so I as always, we always have Fireball whiskey with us whenever we tape an episode of our show. We had the Kaplan twins on. We gave them a bottle. We give bottles away a lot to people. Sometimes
it's good stuff. People like it.
People love that stuff. I actually have a bottle with me right here, and I'm gonna drink some of it. But if you listen when I open the top of this bottle, you can hear in the bottle. You can hear the Fireball whiskey talking, and it's
you can't hear Fireball talking.
Oh, you totally can. Hang on, let me take the lid off. Ready?
Yoga, the man. I could be the man.
There he is.
I'm gonna be the man today.
That's the
We're
sound.
Gonna have fun.
That's the sound of the Fireball whiskey inside the bottle.
It's like encouraging you.
It does. Hey there, Fireball whiskey.
Hey, man.
Hey, I'm so excited. I can't wait to drink you.
Man, stick it. Get rid of all this small talk. Just drink me already so I can have some fun in your
all
tummy,
right,
bro.
Get in my tummy. Get in my tummy.
Well, make it happen. Oh, yeah, here we go.
Oh, yeah. Oh. How is it down there?
Oh my goodness, dude! It's so cool down here. But dude, what the hell did you eat for lunch?
Oh
my God! It smells like dog shit down here, bro.
Oh well, hopefully that Fireball whiskey will make things smell just a little bit better in there.
I can't. I'm gonna have to hang out in your stomach for a while and make it smell good. So keep drinking that shit, bro.
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna drink a little bit more. Here we go.
A little more. Yeah, we're having a party on Steven's stomach.
Drown out these horrible choices I've made.
Woo!
Oh, Fireball whiskey. Fireball, it makes you feel good and it makes your stomach smell better. All right, back to the show. Before we hop into Starship Troopers, which is where we're going to, I want to ask you just a quick question. We were going through your, through IMDb and through different things and looking up stuff, doing our research. And two things. Number one, there was a lot of talk that on the set of Robocop, it was a very difficult set because of some of the extreme stuff that was being put on people. I mean, as far as the costume, for Peter
Weller,
that it was an extreme set, that it could get kind of tough on that set. Was it as a writer, but since you didn't have to wear the suit and do the stuff, like could you see it kind of happening around you that it was kind of tricky for them a little bit or not
Oh yeah, no, it was I think Phil Tippett, who did, the great visual effects artist who did the walkers and the
Great stop-motion
AT-ATs in Star Wars, and did Ed 209 on Robocop, said that making Robocop was like being in a car accident. and it was that kind of trauma, and it took a while to get over it. And I think the reason that it was tough was that we didn't have that much money. I think the final budget on that is like $13.9. So it's pretty cheap for that time. So we had a lot of ambitious stuff to do with that. The director sees things that other people don't see in a way that he knows something's not working. And other people are like, "What? What's the matter with this?" And he would be very tough about getting what he wanted. And he was, I hate to say it, he was always right. And people don't like to be wrong, so you can see where that goes. And so there was a lot of pressure, and there were a lot of hurty feelings at times. The character of Robocop himself is such a cauldron. And it's so difficult, and no one knew what it should be exactly, except what we'd written in the script. And here's this suit, and here's this poor actor Peter, who's a serious actor, stuffed into this suit. And it, when it first started, we weren't sure what it should be. I mean, the actor wasn't sure. I think the director knew what it should be, and there was this intense fight that was about lines in the script. It wasn't really about that. It was really about, I got to go out there and be this character. And somehow out of that, it was a bad week, and then out of that was born this character. And I don't really, it's now I look at it more and more as this thing like, he had to get in that suit, and then this happened and that happened, and then suddenly you have this character.
Yeah,
and it didn't just happen automatically, and Peter really did it.
Yeah, well, Peter had a mime coach that was like a mime movement coach that came in to work with him on the character, and they had worked out all these moves, and then on the first day the first day of putting the suit on, he had never gotten to practice with the suit, and so he did like one day, and Paul Verhoeven said that it was like a mistake that they were like, look, we're going to give him 3 days to learn how to move in the suit, relearn all these moves again, and then we'll start shooting again. Right. And it made it so that he could really do the character the right way. But
I remember him saying in an interview that when it finally clicked for him is when he was either told or decided to slow down his movements a lot, which made the character, gave it a lot of weight and made it more imposing. Yeah. He was like, because the original idea was that it would be very fast because it's cutting edge technology, but making it very slow and lumbersome. It almost made it a horror movie for anyone that was up against him.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
No matter how fast I run, it's still catching me.
I love that movie so much.
I think you're right about because I remember Paul, specifically saying, "Okay, don't do 3 things, do 1 thing." Mm-hmm. And so he simplified it, and he made it. You're right when you say he made it. It made it heavier. It made it like more. He gave more gravity to the character that way. So that was interesting.
Did you know then that you would be launching the career of Bill Farmer, who's now the voice of Goofy for the last 30 years?
I didn't know that, but I just ran. I love Bill Farmer, and that was like, I remember he was on the set, and it was this big crowd scene, and Paul said, "Go talk to this guy. He doesn't have his lines down yet." And Paul had been like, had already done something with him, and so he was the nicest guy in the world, and he played the news correspondent, and named after my godson, Justin Ballard Watkins, and he was great. And then recently, I ran into his wife through another friend of mine, Louis Abernathy, who who took me to Genghis Cohen for the first time, I must say.
Wow.
Is also in Titanic.
It all ties together.
It all ties together. But anyway, he was Bill Farmer's wife. I met Bill Farmer's wife, and she said, "Oh, he's the voice of Goofy. He's had the greatest, And I was like, wow, who knew?
Yeah,
that was great.
right?
That was really good.
I know when he came and did our podcast, and he did our live show too, and performed stand up. He followed Dane Cook on stage in front of the sold
Dane
out
Cook and Tom
Improv.
Segura were the two comics right before him.
Oh, and he
Crushed.
fucking crushed.
And he hadn't done
man.
stand-up in like 25 years.
He hadn't done it
Yeah.
at the Improv in easily 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
So when we look through when we start researching RoboCop, right? You start running into not only RoboCop the movie, but RoboCop the TV series, and then the second time they tried the TV series, and then a third time, and then a fourth. They've done a lot of. They've tried to do
The animated series.
Tons of
the
stuff.
animated
Yeah.
series, the video game. The second time they did a video, like they have done this a lot. How involved have you been with other versions of this, or RoboCop 2, the other parts of?
We got fired from RoboCop when we had written in about a month. No, it was actually about 3 months. We had written from zero. We had written this very creaky second idea, and then the writer's strike came along, and we got fired because they force majeured us, and they hired Frank Miller to write under the
Pseudonym?
No, the WGA gave him an authorization that they
Yeah.
would, So we were off the project suddenly, and other people wrote, and we haven't really had much to do with any of the RoboCop stuff since then. We were brought back in to work on the TV show in Canada, and we wrote the pilot for that. The big problem there seems to have been that they really couldn't quite get the tone right.
Yeah.
And later the showrunner told me, we just couldn't get it, guys. And I think the tone and the humor is so important to why that movie works. It's more important than people think it is.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that when they did the remake recently, and it was they really seemed. Jose Padilla is a great filmmaker, he really is, and he's a documentarian, and he kind of comes from a school of like cop melodrama. If you look at Elite Squad, and so he went right into all the horror of it, the wife, the kid, and all that kind of stuff. And I think the audience just kind of
gets bummed out.
A little bit goes a long way of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a fun thing happen right before we started the show. Eric Peterkovsky, who is our booker on our show and helps book a lot of the folks that we have on here, called us to say that he had someone that he wants to book, and then we said Ed Neumeier's coming to do the show today, and he goes, "Oh, Ed Neumeier, I used to work for a company called it was
Bauer Benedict.
Bauer
It was an
Benedict
agency.
agency, which ended up becoming UTA, which is the agency I'm at, and he said that he was working there reading scripts, and that he got a script co-written by Ed Neumeier and
Miguel Ferrer, the actor who played Bob Morton.
And on the cover of the script, it said, "Fuck off, butthole. This one's mine." And that's all Eric Peterkovsky could remember about it. And he said it was super. He just remember it was violent and it was a badass piece of work, but he couldn't tell me anymore.
It was something that Miguel Ferrer and I became friends on the set of RoboCop, and we decided we would write a script together. And we wrote a script about these two hitmen who lived together in this kind of fantasy version of the mid-50s, and they were young men trying to make their mark, and it was called Hitman. And they lived in this kind of weird this city called Big Town, and we were young men. So what can I say? So they say every character has to want something. So basically, the character, the main character that Miguel wanted to play, whose name was Rudy. Rudy wanted a blowjob. That was what he really wanted, and nobody in the 1950s could get a blowjob except for
That's hilarious.
Except for the head gangster who got them all. Or something like that.
Yes!
And so they take down the big gangster. He falls in love with the wrong girl. There was this other kind of weird thing where the the partner is this like guy who's really good with guns and he's really smart technically and stuff, but he might be gay, but he can't talk about that. So it was this wild little thing that everybody was sort of interested in at first, and then I think they rightfully were afraid of it.
Well, the checks write themselves on something like that.
I think the movie never got made, but it kept every 2 years, every so often it would show up. We had a reading once. George Clooney read the narration, and we had all these. We had a big reading with all of Miguel's friends.
Oh my God!
And so it went around and around and around. I think when movies do that, scripts do that, and they don't get made, there's a reason that they don't get made.
Sure.
And I think this would have been very amusing, but it was.
Well, if
it was
I ever become a studio head, you send me the finished
bring me
draft
that script.
Bring me that monster blowjob.
Find me that
movie.
butthole script.
Yeah.
Where's that monster
blowjob movie?
So so we were really trying to shock and offend, and I think it's interesting because we turned that in, and Peter Benedict, who was one of the partners at Bauer Benedict, he was sort of like, "Oh my God, this is really an Ed Neumeier script." So anyway.
Is there other things that you've written or worked on that you'd like to see done that have not come to light?
I actually feel like I get tired of ideas, and if an idea doesn't start moving forward in a way and grow, it's just I kind of lose interest in it after a few years. And I do feel that if a script hasn't been made, you have to be careful of it. There's usually a reason. I know everybody else thinks, oh, there's all these great scripts that have never been made, but I don't know. I had this experience once where I almost got a job on a script called Pluto Nash.
Oh, yeah.
Pluto Nash was like I had read it when I first got into the business, and I thought it was great. And then 15 years later, it was going to get made, and I thought, God, there's nobody better in this world to write Pluto Nash than me. and I didn't get the job, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was just bitter about it. And then it came out, and it was the biggest bomb Warner Brothers had ever had, and it killed the director who didn't hire me. Ha! And so you just don't know, and I'm not sure why that is, because there are scripts that really read well, and then somehow they don't make it through, and I think it's because there's not enough people saying, I believe in this or something like that.
Yeah, sure, I get that. When you started on Starship Troopers, even though you started on it, when they put it into, writing and when you started production, but you originally started with this script as a book because you were a fan of the book originally.
So Robert
right?
Heinlein wrote in 1958 Starship Troopers, a year after I was born. And I read it like many people do when they're 13 or 14. If for those who know science fiction, you know that it was one of what they call, it was the last of Heinlein's juveniles. He wrote a bunch of books for kids, science fiction books, and then after Starship Troopers, he became a serious writer for adults. And Starship Troopers, when you're 14 years old, 13 years old, or about to join the military or in the military, is the greatest book you've ever read, and you've kind of. It's interesting because it's very minimalist, and you almost create your own story for it. If you go read the book right now, you're going to say, gosh, there's no story here at all. It's really just a bunch of ideas about military service and responsibility and how people are and stuff like that. So it has a real philosophical core. It was one of his. He was known for a few books, but it was Starship Troopers and Stranger in a Strange Land and some other ones. And I think that he is best known now for Starship Troopers. I don't believe that the Heinlein estate likes the movie because it doesn't reflect what they think the book is. And there's a lot of hardcore fans who don't like it because it sort of turns it on its head. But strangely, the military loves it.
Yeah, and, they really do love
it. No, one day I was somewhere with a friend of mine in D.C. and they said, "Oh, you're Starship Troopers? Your movie plays 24 hours a day in every combat theater that we're in." This was a military person.
Wow.
And somewhere in the world, some soldiers are watching your movie. One day, many years after that movie, it was 115 degrees in Pasadena. I was trying to get some, gas for my grill, and you go down to the U-Haul yard, and there's nobody there. No one wants to come out. And I see this big guy, running between buildings. Oh, there's the guy. So I go after him, and he's got these Varney sunglasses on, and he's just an enormous man. And I think, oh, that guy was a soldier. And I'm getting my propane, and I said, so what do you mean? He said, well, I've had my 3 enlistments. I got to do another one. I lost my house. I'm going back. I'm part of the National Guard. I was like, oh, and he said, He said, and I said something like, I wrote a movie once about the military. And he interrupted me immediately and said, my favorite movie is Starship Troopers. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I show that to all my new guys. I'm a sergeant. I push soldiers. I show it to them all. And the first thing I should do is sit them down and make them watch Starship Troopers. And I said, oh, that's the movie I wrote. But that kind of didn't matter to him. He just kept going. And he said, that movie, I said, so I finally said, why is that movie so important to you? And he said, well, because you know that scene? There's a scene where like they're on that planet and, you know, suddenly they're facing all these bugs and their lieutenant gets killed. I said, yeah, and this is the Clendathu thing. And he said, that happened to me. And I said, kill them all. And that's what I want my guys to do. So I realized at that moment, you know, okay, wow, this is pretty serious for some people. You know, and if you go over to Afghanistan, apparently there is a Johnny Rico CrossFit gym with a 20-foot high sign that has Johnny Rico on it holding a Morita. And the Canadians fly. One of the Canadian units was flying the mobile infantry thing. So it's interesting when you write these things, you don't know how they're going to hit and what they're going to mean to people.
You know, Casper Van Dien came from a family of military, like a whole military family, and they were pretty unhappy with him being an actor. And not. Yeah,
he went to military school.
He went to military school, and everyone was like, "Why aren't you joining the ranks just like the rest of the family?" And then when he got that movie, when he got your movie, he said that still to this day, his entire family is so proud of him because of that film.
Yeah, I think his dad said to me once. He said, "Yeah, but Dad, I didn't serve," and he said, "No, you did. You did what you were supposed to do." So you know, I'm glad.
That's
Casper
cool.
Casper is such a great. It's hard to even know where to begin with that because again we became quite good friends out of the show. But we know we have some weird relationship together. He's like my little great looking brother. He's like it's very easy for me to write for him, and we just kind of go, oh, maybe we'd do this, and it's always a good idea. So I really enjoy writing that character and hanging out with Casper. It's almost like you made up a character and he became your friend.
I love it.
Now, how did you get Starship Troopers? Like, is that because your relationship with Paul and he was signed on, and they licensed it and they were going to make this movie, or how did that come together?
Well, originally, I went to my producer, John Davison, and said, I just saw this Jurassic Park movie that our friend Phil Tippett did. And, we could do a movie like Starship Troopers. And I had written a little treatment for it that kind of added all this story in because I hadn't really read the book in many years, but I remembered it in a certain way, and I thought, oh, there's a girl, and there's a triangle, and, all this kind of stuff. And so we went and pitched it to we pitched the idea of doing a movie like this, and I guess we both assumed that Starship Troopers might or might not be available. But we went to Sony, where we had a relationship, and we pitched this movie, where John did. And they were like, we don't get it, whatever. And then John went and called up the Heinlein estate and found out that no one had ever optioned that book. They'd just been ripping it off for years. So we optioned the book, and suddenly I was writing Starship Troopers. And it was a little bit of God, you'd go someplace and you'd tell somebody you were writing Starship Troopers, and they go, oh. That's the reason I joined the Marines, that book. So it already had a cultural following, and I felt like I had to do a good job.
Were you on your own on that one?
I was on my own on that one, and Paul was off making Basic Instinct, and then he was shooting, and we would meet on other things. And he knew I was doing this, but I actually decided not to tell him much about this until the draft was done. Yeah. And so I worked with John on it, and it took about a year to write something. And when we gave it to Paul, he was like, well, okay, sure, I get it. And so we sat down and we did the second draft, which was, again, substantially what the movie became, while he was working on Showgirls, I think it was. And we just kind of slowly ramped up, and there was, it wasn't for sure he would do it. When Showgirls came out, I think, and didn't do as well as he wanted it to do, I think that helped get Starship Troopers made. So thank God for Showgirls.
Hilarious.
Now, how did the newsreel part of that come about? Where it was sort of like have that newsreel feel to it?
Sort of.
Well, in RoboCop, I had always the media breaks were something I had put in as sort of curtain breaks, and Paul understood those. We did have a big fight once about whether or not you should break into those. Like, would you be in a newsroom and show them, or would they just break full screen? And I wanted them to just break full screen.
Yeah.
And that was the only big fight we ever had. And then he kind of came back and went, yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. And so when we came to Starship, I used a similar device. But in that case, I wanted it to be, it was really about propaganda.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I did when I was doing Starship is I read, I watched all these propaganda movies that were made during World War II between the, Pearl Harbor and the end of the movie. There's about 4 years of movies there that are where Hollywood's at war.
Yeah.
And I think one of them actually ends with something like they'll keep fighting and they'll win, which is how we end the movie. But it was all about you don't know the outcome of the war yet, but you're assuming that because of your sacrifice and your superiority, you're going to win.
Yeah, it always felt to me like a World War II movie about bugs in space.
Well, I think that Paul and I knew it would be World War II. We knew it would be Leni Riefenstahl. I was writing that way. I used to describe it as a Delmar Davies movie, like A Summer Place, where you had Tab Hunter and Sandra Dee. Except that I would say, but they join the military, go to space, and fight giant bugs and become Nazis.
Yeah,
and so it's a very meta idea of using movies and history kind of loosely to make something. And so I think we're making a sort of a World War II movie there, and a lot of the decisions were made about World War II. Even the shape of the ships. I'd done some reading somewhere and said that the reason a Sherman tank looks the way it does is because that's the biggest shape they could mold. And that was the turret of a tank. And so they had certain. So I said, I told that to Paul, and Paul says, yeah, we should make the ships look that way. So they're really, you notice they're round, they're kind of big, square shapes. They're not like sleek George Lucas stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it was Paul wanted them to fire real rounds. He didn't want them to use laser guns.
Yeah.
We had a big problem with the book, which was that I had written it with power suits in it. And believe it or not, in those days, that was just one war too many for us.
Yeah,
it was like, well, you can have the bugs, you can have the power suits. So
yeah, I know there was talk about the power suits being that they could jump really high and they could do these leaps, but then also that meant green screen and
it was wire work and green
and
screen and all these. I mean, it was going to take forever.
Yeah, but you know what, man?
I wonder if that's why Halo never got made as a movie.
Well, I don't know. You can do it now. I think
now it's less of a thing.
Yeah.
The reason Paul didn't want to do it was because he thought it gave the humans too much advantage, and he wanted them to look iconically like soldiers.
Yeah.
And I think it was a very. He also
it's
wanted
a very smart idea.
It was a very smart idea
because it keeps them down on the ground,
vulnerable.
Right. So
I liked in a way that it wasn't RoboCop. That it wasn't like these guys were all like geared up and totally formidable against what they were fighting. It was the opposite of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know who the people are better. And when later in Starship 3, we did a Marauder power suit, but we only used it for 5 minutes because it's a little power suit goes a long way. In my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
That should be a bumper sticker.
Which ones of because we're the one that is premiering at San Diego Comic-Con,
the anime.
The anime version. Up to that version, have you been involved with all of them, or have you taken off times throughout it, or how has that worked for you?
Well, I have an interesting relationship with Sony about these things, and they have made. They decided because when Starship Troopers came out, it was not the financial hit that they wanted, but it was incredibly successable on home video. I mean, I think it may have been one of the most successful titles there was. It hit right when the video market, when the DVD video market went big.
Absolutely.
And I think they sold zillions of copies of it. So it had a lot of brand awareness, and they decided that their home video division wanted to make some little movies. And both Phil Tippett and I wanted to direct. And John Davison said, well, guys, if you make these little cheap movies, that's how John talks, you could both direct before you're 50 or too old, whatever. That was the big come on. And so Phil directed the first one, Starship 2.
Yeah.
And he wanted to make a
hero of the Federation.
He wanted to make kind of a horror movie and with zombies and things like that, which I was, okay, I'll try. And so we made that movie for like $5.5 million on a stage in Redondo Beach, where it was the hardest show I've ever been on for the least amount of money. Yeah. I must say I learned more about making movies doing that than I did on the movies before that. And then that movie came out and did. No one liked it that much, but it did a lot of business. It made a lot of money. So they made another one. And this one, now it was my turn to direct. But,
Marauder?
Yes, but Phil and John had enough, and they left. And so I made it with another producer at Sony, David Lancaster. And David Lancaster turned out to be a great producer for me. He went on and he did, most recently he did Nightcrawler.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty good movie.
And on that one, you had Jolene Blaylock come back, and you had Casper Van Dien.
Well, Jolene was actually from Star Trek.
Yeah.
I made a big deal
right.
about how we had
the hottest chick in the history of Star Trek.
But
hands
that was
down.
the return.
Jolene
That was
Blaylock.
the return of Casper Van Dien.
Yeah, I said I would only do it for whatever reason. Phil wanted to make a movie about anonymous people, and maybe it was also a cost issue. I had always thought Casper or Johnny Rico should be in all these things. So I said I only want to do this if I wanted to make a movie about religion, and I wanted to make a movie with starring Casper Van Dien. And so they said yes, and that's kind of what we got to do. It was a very good experience, and the movie turned out probably better than it should have.
Well, I've seen Trader of Mars, the new one, and it's badass. It's a total badass.
Well,
movie.
it's because the director Shinji Aramaki is quite amazing, and I hope that anime fans will feel the way you do about it.
I feel like they will, absolutely, and I think Casper is awesome, and Dina Meyer's back on that one.
Well, I actually got them to do. I said, we have to have Casper back again. Because I guess I should put it in my contract. But I also had an idea for bringing the character of Dizzy back in a way that was acceptable since she was killed on Klendath, or on Planet P. So they actually went and got Dina, and so that was fun.
I love it.
So cool.
That's amazing, man. Are you excited about Comic-Con? Do you like going down there?
It's hard not to be excited at Comic. It's the biggest boat show in the world. It's
all
amazing.
about excitement,
and
really.
it's hard. You go there, you can wear you out, but it's really, if you like genre and you like these things, it's sort of amazing. I'm pleased that I'm going to Comic-Con.
Yeah.
You know,
Do you
Stephen, are you
walk
excited
the
about
floor?
all the lines at Comic-Con? Are you excited about
I can't
that?
wait for the lines. What is your favorite thing to do at Comic-Con when you go?
Usually we do some sort of a panel or something, and that's scary, but it's fun, and you sort of that sort of defines it. Otherwise, you just get to see everybody, and you see a bunch of people you don't usually see, and you can go have good sushi at Nobu or something, and wave at. There's actually the last time we were there 5 years ago, we sat down in I don't know if it was Nobu or not, but it was some ritzy restaurant that the Sony people were taking us to, and there sitting by himself at a table was Quentin Tarantino wearing a serape from Django. And it was all by himself. It was this giant, and everybody's like, oh my God, that's Quentin. That's Quentin. So I have this rule with kids that when you see somebody you like, you should go over and say, I want to shake your hand.
Absolutely.
And so I brought my putative stepson, my girlfriend's son, Cameron, who was, I think he was about 16 or 17, and I said, go over, you know what to do, go over there and shake his hand. So all the Sony people were like, oh my God, what are you doing? And so he went over and he said something to him, and he shook, and Quentin was really nice to him, and then he looked over and he waved, he said, hi Casper, hi Ed, and then Sony thought we were cool for at least, least a day.
For at least a lunch.
That's awesome.
I had that happen
love
with George Takei yesterday. I met him.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I was at a memorial service for a Japanese-American woman, and she was involved with the Japanese-American Museum here with that, and I turned around, and I was like, oh, that's George Takei back there. And then after the service was over, I went over, I talked to him, and he was very nice, and I told him we'd done a podcast with Walter Koenig.
Yeah.
And I told him that Walter has a shelf of Chekhovs that we saw in his office, and asked him if he had a shelf of Sulus, and he said he had a room full of Sulus. And then I told him I loved him Howard Stern, and he gave me an oh my. And then I was like, that's everything I need.
That's all you
right,
want.
I'm out.
Now you can
Thank
die.
Don't
I'm out.
bother
Good
anymore.
night.
Yeah, I was like, I'm leaving on a high note. I don't want to overstay my welcome and make him annoyed. So I was like, all right, thank you very much, and I was gone.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love that. That's the best. And especially at Comic-Con, you have these weird interactions with people that you would never run into anywhere else in the world. The last couple of years ago, I was there and I ran into M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh wow!
And I said, wow, M. Night Shyamalan, huge fan, man. Love your stuff. It's so terrific. He goes, oh, thanks a lot. Thanks. I appreciate it. I go, and I can't wait to see the new movie because and I can't wait to see what happens. The end, the thing, when you do the thing. And he goes, what thing? And I go, you know when you do the little twist at the end. Yeah, you know your little twist? And he goes, whatever you say. And I go, whatever. No, it's like, that's your thing. And he goes, okay, sure, whatever you say, buddy. And I go, it's not what I say. It's what everyone in history says about you. I mean, you have the twist. You do the twist. And he goes, okay, and like walked away, super awkward. And it was cool.
Never be in an M. Night Shyamalan movie.
So wonderful.
Do you remember when you first told me that story? What I told you?
What's
I
that?
said he just did that for you in real life.
He just did the twist.
He did a third act twist.
Didn't you want a third act twist on me?
You wanted
It
to call him
was
Chubby.
so
You should have
good.
called him Chubby Checker.
Yeah.
Oh God, I've had a couple of those where it's.
I think I know what it is. Here's what I would say.
Yeah.
Nobody can resist. Mostly, no one can resist if somebody sincerely comes up to them and say, "Hey, I really like you," and you don't ask anything from them.
Sure.
And you just say, "You're really great," and shake their hand and whatever.
Yeah.
If you start talking to them like you know them,
right.
if you say, "Hey, I read about this happened to you," or they don't like that. It's like an invasion of them.
It gets too much.
And it gets too much. So I think you just have to go up and say, "Hey, you're great, man. Thanks."
Absolutely. I think there's nothing wrong with saying that. However, David Blaine, I was at the W Hotel, and I was standing waiting for my car, and David Blaine was standing out there, and I went, "Oh my God, David Blaine! So, I'm such a huge fan. Love magic. Love watching your stuff, and your specials are so terrific. Big fan." And he goes, "You want to see something amazing?" And I go, "Yeah, of course." He goes, "All right, pick a card." Pulls out a deck of cards, just him and me. Pick a card. I pick one. He goes, "Okay, put it back in the deck." I put it back in the deck. He goes, "Okay. Is this your card?" Pulls out a card. I go, "No, that's not it." He goes, "Sorry, it's late." And I go, "Oh. Well, it was nice meeting you." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm a little drunk, and it's been... what time is it?" And I go, I think it's like... I look at my watch. I go, "It's like 2 in the morning." He goes, "Look again." I look at my watch again. He goes, "Look harder." I look at my watch. My card is folded up and inside my watch. I was like, "How did you do that?" He goes, "I told you." And then he just walked away. Very good. It was the fucking coolest.
That's very good.
I love that, and that's my favorite. I got to give huge props to you and to Casper Van Dien and everyone else for letting me moderate your panel. I get to moderate the
awesome.
Sony panel.
Do you know how relieved we are that you're going to be there to carry us?
Oh, get out of here! I cannot wait. I'm very, very excited.
No, it's going to be
Tons
fun.
of Starship Trooper
be
fans are going to be like, "Oh, that's so cool. Ed Neumeier's here. Oh, it's so cool. Johnny Rico, Casper Van Dien's here. And who's that fat guy? Get out of the way.
Get out of the way.
Get away, fat guy.
Stop ruining everything.
I want to stare at Casper Van Dien's hair."
That question is not specific enough at Comic-Con.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's that fat guy?
Who's that fat guy
doesn't
cover anything. Before we wrap things up, I have to ask you, favorite... do you have a favorite moment from each film? Do you have like a favorite? Is there a favorite moment that you can mention, or is it all?
I think the moment for me, there isn't.
Wait a second. Hang on. We have a present for you. Hang on.
yeah.
Think about it. Think about it.
Okay.
Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah.
While Steven's doing that, is Ed 209 named after you?
Ed 209 was kind of accidentally named after me because I wrote it. What do they call this thing? Well, they'd call it an enforcement droid because I'd watched Star Wars. And then I thought, and they usually put numbers after these things.
Yeah.
So I came up with a number. And then I looked at it one day and I went, the next day, I went, "Oh, that's my name." And I thought, good. And then I never really said anything about it. No one ever said anything about it. It just kind of, I think John Davison used to kind of kid, Ed 209, just like Ed 209, you're destructive. And you don't know what you're doing. But anyway, no, it happened that way. And I do like Ed 209 as a character a great deal. I think he's a wonderful character.
Great character.
Yeah. Oh God, when he falls down the stairs, that is just the best.
Thank you.
It's my favorite.
Phil Tippett and the baby rage at the bottom.
Oh God, I love that.
See, what Phil understood was that here's how he works. He thought, "Oh, this is new, so it's a baby."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you like it as you like it. It's really smart.
Yeah, you guys got so much out of that thing. Like, I love the shot after RoboCop shoots it with the gun and you see its legs, and you're like, "Oh man, it's still kicking."
Okay.
And then you see the rest of it, and the whole top half is missing.
So what is that a reference to?
I
That's
don't
a
know.
reference to the Triceratops in the original King Kong, when they shoot it and they walk by the tail and it goes.
Oh, cool.
I'm sure. I didn't ask him.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's
sure.
what he was doing.
Oh my God.
Because we all know that's you
Yeah.
know that's the great stop motion.
Oh, that's great.
Well, look, Comic-Con's going to be a big party, and the best way to party is with Fireball whiskey. That's why we brought you
All
a
right.
bottle of our favorite,
Thank you very
our
much.
favorite
Oh my
whiskey.
God.
There you go.
It's cinnamon whiskey.
It's cinnamon whiskey, the greatest Canadian whiskey, the greatest of all time whiskey.
I know what I'm going to do with this. Next time Michael Miner and I have a problem writing, I'm going to say, Mike, I got a solution for us.
Fireball whiskey.
We have a new writing partner.
We have a new writing partner. Fireball
Looks
whiskey.
kind of like the devil with a horse's head, but we'll do it. We've seen worse.
I love it. Dude, thank you so much for coming and doing this. You have social media and ways of people looking up and seeing you and watching your stuff?
I'm on
and whatnot.
Twitter and Facebook.
Okay.
And my Facebook page is open to anyone, and I'm the easiest friend in the world.
I love it. I love it. What is it? Just your name?
Yeah, it's just my name.
Ed Neumeier.
Ed
Got it.
Neumeier.
What about you, Michael Black? What's your?
I am on all social media at Mike Black Attack.
Yes, you are. And what about you, Matthew?
You can find links to everything at funnymatt.com, or if you are irritated by my comments, let me know at mattwalkersucks.com.
Which people do. People do that constantly. You can always get me at Stephen Glickman, STPHEN, Glickman on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to the Nighttime Show podcast. Happy Comic-Conning, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful time again. Ed, it is an honor to have you on the show. We are huge fans. Thanks again, man. You're the
Great
coolest.
pleasure. I'm looking forward to Comic-Con. We're going to do more of this.
Oh, yeah.
Stand up in front